I'm going to tell you on this episode about what I believe is truly my greatest accomplishment in e-commerce, my growth marketing biggest win. I spent 10 years in e-commerce. I'm going to tell you about the biggest success that I have ever had. And that is with a company that I was running when I was a CEO of 4x400, one of our brands. And when I was a CEO of 4x400, we had up to 6 brands in our portfolio at a time. We exited a couple of those, and this is one of the ones that we exited, okay? And so as I start telling you this story, you're not going to believe me that this is my greatest accomplishment, or you're going to think, boy, that is a pretty poor greatest accomplishment for 10 years of work, okay? But that's the point. I'm spoiling it in advance. I'm telling you, it's not gonna sound that impressive, but I'm gonna tell you why. Actually, it's really, really impressive, okay? The company was doing about 6 million in revenue at its peak. And we did that at about a 5% bottom line. Now, you will hear that immediately. I know, especially if you've listened to me or watched me for a while, right? You are like, that is really not that great. I don't know why you're bragging about this, whatever. Especially when I tell you more about the brand, okay? The brand had a good and effective product. The product worked well, okay? Customers liked it. They consistently got good reviews, really didn't have any negative, bad reviews, whatever. In a niche community, it was a strong brand. And had deep authenticity there. We had a great influencer in the space who was on our cap table, like a really crucial person in that community. And he was really a great partner. He was really helpful. He let us, he was very helpful in letting us utilize him in a lot of different ways. It was CPG, so it was a refillable product. We got up to over $2 million in meta ad spend at a 2.5 ROAS, in a year, something like that. I don't know if that's the exact number, but it's somewhere in that range. 2.5 ROAS on click, over a couple million in spend per year. And consistently, we're achieving 20-25% annual growth, okay, on the business. So when we exited that business, I don't remember what the total exit number was for because there's a few details with it unrelated, but we exited that business not for some huge number, okay? In fact, forget even the exit number. The point is, there was no crazy valuation in the business outside of the numbers that I am telling you right there. So why is a $6 million brand at a 5% bottom line my greatest achievement? Because of the thing that you need to understand for you to understand what is actually happening in your business and the thing that you are building, okay? I think that if you understand the financials of this business and of your own business, and you start to think about what makes a good e-commerce brand, then it will make some more sense to you why that actually, in my view, was sort of an incredible accomplishment, okay? And it's because almost nothing about this brand actually worked very well economically for DTC. And I didn't see that at the time as clearly as I could have. I sort of saw this a little bit, and so did Taylor and other people I was working with to some degree. But we were just so stuck in our DTC world, we hadn't really fully flushed out our sense of what makes a good DTC brand. And if your business is struggling in some way, it's possible that it has nothing to do with your tactics and everything to do with something more fundamental in your brand. We were constantly going back and forth in this brand, working through what do we do to make it bigger and better, and what can we do tactically to solve these problems, when in fact, what we needed to do was address the whole model. And what I want to get out in this show, and use this brand as an example, but also just to think a little bit more broadly, what I want to get at here today is to help you think through this question of where the leverage points in your D2C business are. Because if you can do that effectively, then you will be able to have a much better idea of what you should be doing next in your business, whether that's efforting a certain area of it, spending more money on ads, spending less money on ads, or heck, shutting the business down altogether, maybe starting a certain D2C business. I don't know. But there's large scale strategic decisions you can make if you understand what makes a good e-commerce business and how it applies to your business, okay? And that's true at any stage of your business. So let me tell you a little bit more about this brand, okay? The reasons why this, I think, was such a good accomplishment. And this, I think, will help you think through your P&L. By the way, this ladders back to something that I generally call P&L design, with a hat tip to Taylor Holiday and some of the stuff that he's put out on this same thing. We use slightly different language for a few different points, but are in basic agreement here. And I'll refer to more of his stuff in a little bit. But the basic concept here is thinking through your total P&L, not as something that was handed down from on high to you, but as something that you get choices, or you get to choose how you shape, you're not stuck with it, okay? All right, so to come back to the P&L for this brand, okay, the first point here is that this brand had less than 50 points of landed gross margin. What do I mean by that? I mean, after accounting for COGS, after accounting for packaging, after accounting for merchant account fees, any returns we forecasted, fulfillment costs, pick and pack, and crucially for this brand, the cost of shipping the product to the customer. Okay, for all of those things, we were able to get the business as the best we could get the margin to was in like around 50 points of landed margin. Okay, so for every dollar we made, 50 cents went out the door in variable costs. And so that was where we started with. Okay, that was the first problem. That margin is probably not good enough in e-commerce. Okay, secondly, we had about 25% in 1 year LTV, despite that it was a refillable, consumable product. Maybe we just made it last too long. Maybe it just worked too well. I don't know. But like 25% 1 year LTV. So customers, but again, just be clear about that. Customers were worth $1 to us on day one. Okay, if a customer's worth $1 to us on day one, they were worth an additional 25 cents to us over the course of the next year. Okay, no matter how many tactical things we did there. And then third, we were not very clear on what our OpEx was in the business. And this is partly related to the aggregator model that we were working within, the holding company model. It was also like, I mean, there's just a whole bunch of mistaken assumptions in the early stages of that business. But we just weren't very clear on what the overhead was. The accounting was tricky and for a couple of ways, again, because the aggregator model, shared services model, some of those things. And then also, I think it just wasn't that lean of a business in general. Even if we were clear on the numbers, we just weren't that lean. Which again, I'll come back to in a little bit. And so now what you have is a business that is low margin for D2C, that is low LTV, and that is relatively high or at least unclear OpEx. And what I just described to you is a quagmire of difficulty in the e-commerce business that is so difficult to get out from under. Because what it really reflects is that for me as an operator, and I'm going to take full responsibility for this because it was ultimately something that fell on me, I should not have been even thinking about tactical ways to make that brand better. That brand is dead on arrival in D2C. Unless there is something else somewhere out there that makes it incredible. Like, for example, if there was a huge volume of organic new customer acquisition that could happen in that business, okay, then maybe it would work, right? Because then you would be able to have your ad spend be really low as a percentage of revenue, and now you can create a big bottom line and an opportunity for growth. But that wasn't the case. Okay, or something like that. And I'm actually going to walk through a few more of these things like this because I want you to be thinking about the P&L of your business as you watch or listen to this, so that you can think through like, okay, where is there actual opportunity to, for a real growth mechanism here? Okay, so that is the basic structure of the business, and that is why getting it to even $6 million to me, in retrospect, is actually an incredible accomplishment. We had to run at a very high ROAS. We had very little LTV. That meant that growth is really hard, and so immediately growth is difficult, even if you're doing well on your ads. Okay, growth is really difficult at that point, and you're constantly shelling out cash to buy inventory because it's lower margin. We just never had a bunch of bottom line dollars to go plunge back into inventory. So cash management was really difficult. Like all of these elements of it were just really tough, and we weren't creating any leverage on the overhead side of the business. So what I'm describing to you is a bad business, is a bad D2C business. And there's so much that happens in e-commerce because people have done a really bad job of opportunity selection. They've started to apply force to their business. And by force, I mean their effort and money, okay, to their business. And yet they have not realized that, in fact, there is a fundamental problem in the business, which is that no matter how much force you apply, the thing you're trying to move is really heavy. And this is where the concept of leverage is really helpful. What you need to be looking for in your business is where is it that I can apply force and the thing is actually move, and no matter how heavy the thing is, it moves really easily. That's the idea of leverage, right? That force gets multiplied as I apply it uniquely. And if you understand where that is in your business, then you can build your business in a way that creates really massive outcomes for yourself. Okay. If it turns out that you look around your business and there is nowhere to create that kind of leverage, then you are going to have all kinds of problems doing anything really effectively. So let me break down to you, and the way to think about this is to think about it at the level of the P&L, okay? And this sort of gets into something that I think people talk about sometimes, which is D2C a business model or is it a sales channel? Sometimes people will kind of have this debate. And I think it's helpful to think about D2C as a business model, as a full model, because if you can think about what makes D2C a potentially good model, or, I guess this sort of conflates it, but what makes D2C a good sales channel, it helps you take a step back into what makes it potentially a good business model, okay? If you are serious about speaking to your customers where they are at, all the way through your funnel with great messaging, if landing pages are an important part of your strategy, you should be considering Fermat, which is way more than landing page software. You go to fermatcommerce.com/AF to use the software that I think is the best software and service, and it really is both software and service, for generating creative funnels, ad creative funnels at scale for a brand that is serious about speaking to a lot of different customers in a lot of different ways. Here's what I mean. If you're running ads where you're trying to talk to 5 different kinds of customers who have 5 different kinds of relationships to your product, you really have a hard time doing that and sending all of that traffic and all of those ads to the same central PDPs. You've got to get better at messaging customers all the way through the funnel. And Fermat is the best tool of which I am aware to do that. So on the technical end of things, Fermat's amazing. The actual landing page software, first of all, goes way beyond landing pages. It is landing pages, but it's also custom PDPs. So you can go straight from landing page to PDP. You can, of course, change the offers and build custom offers incredibly easily on through those pages. And it's a custom cart. So you can do custom upsells for each funnel as well, because customers relate to your products differently. And like I said, on a technical level, it's amazing as well. It's the fastest loading pages I've ever seen of any kind for landing pages. Like, it's just unbelievable how quick your customer's experience will be getting from the ad to the landing page and then all the way through the rest of the funnel. On top of that, it's actually a service as well. So Fermat isn't just giving you great tools and then telling you, hey, go make use of them. They actually provide you with an account manager who holds your hand through the process to help you build out funnels, make full use of the tool, get you access to all of the tests they've already run across lots of other brands so that you can know what the best offers and formats and styles to test are, so that you can be on the right foot when you start. So go check out fermatcommerce.com/AF, fermatcommerce.com/AF to get started today. It really is an incredible tool. I'm using it with one of my clients, looking into it for another one right now. With the one client I've used it with so far, we've had a 50% spend increase since the moment we started doing it. It really is great. Go check it out. And the way you do that is by thinking about the P&L. Okay, so Taylor Holiday has this concept of 4-quarter accounting. I think that's a really helpful idea. Basically, the idea is you break your P&L into 4 pieces. Okay, that would be your gross margin, which is all your variable costs. What I was referencing, that 50% number earlier. That's every cost associated with basically from the swipe of the credit card through getting the customer to the product. Okay, secondly, there's your marketing and advertising costs, CAC. Okay, so there's COGS, CAC, and then the third one is OPEX, which is all the fixed costs in your business, overhead, right? That's the way you think about it. So those things. And then the 4th quarter on your P&L is profit. So what's left over after you've paid for all 3 of those things? If you think about those things, it's really, really helpful. And you can sort of think of, you should, by the way, be breaking your P&L into those 4 component parts, okay? If you can do that, it'll really help you see things clearly. And then all, the subsections within each of those, and the line items within each of those. So gross margin, so COGS, again, think landed COGS here. It means including getting the product to the customer. Variable costs, including that is all in COGS. CAC, marketing and advertising costs. OPEX, that's your fixed costs. That's people, places, right? If you've got an office, something like that, and software, typically, those are the main ones, and then profit. Okay, so you should be breaking it down to those 4 things. And what I want to do now is walk through each of those and tell you where there is potential leverage and how to create leverage, because that is the crucial thing for you to know and understand in your business. Okay, so think first about COGS. Okay, I'm going to start with a target. You should be probably thinking about getting COGS over or getting your COGS under 40% of your revenue, okay? So that is, you have 60 points of landed margin. If you have that, you're probably decent, okay? Solid, okay. If you have above 65 points of margin, so COGS at 35 points or under, you're in a pretty good spot. Again, landed COGS all the way to the customers, you're in a pretty good spot. If you have over 70 points of margin, you're great. you have now the makings of a massive advantage. And that is a true leverage point in your business. This is one way, and I've seen brands do this, one way brands create a whole bunch of margin. And this is the place where I think maybe people are most under optimized in the entirety of e-commerce. I'm just amazed. Like, there's a bunch of stuff that goes into this part of your P&L, right? I mean, you might think first in terms of just like cost of goods sold, that's your product costs. Merchant fees, right? The 3% you pay to the credit card company, basically. The customer returns, your shipping costs, your pick and pack, your 3PL fees. And you just got to break it down to those 5 areas. And it's like, okay, great. That's all of the costs in the business. Okay. Except if you actually do that, you can break these down way deeper than that. And I like, for example, if you take your COGS and you actually split it out into product, including different products, having different COGS, right? Different manufacturers, packaging, the box that your packaging goes in, which sometimes is 2 different things, right? Actually, sometimes there's a breakdown for each of those between the sort of manufacturing costs, but also the raw materials, which can be separate. And you can work with your manufacturer on getting those prices down. You can redesign your product so that also you use different materials, right, et cetera. So that's where materials and manufacturing are actually different things. Inbound freight, right? Because let's say you're manufacturing in China, you got to get the product from China to the US. There's like obvious ones there, which is air freight versus ocean freight, but there's a bunch of other little tricks you can do in the midst of that as well. Warehousing fees, like if your product is bigger, it's not just like your 3PL fee or whatever, but if it's bigger and it's moving slower, you're going to have to pay in warehousing fees a little bit more, and so on, right? Order processing, pick and pack. There's just a million, and this is before you talk about freight to the customer, right? And there's a lot of different ways to do that. What about redesigning your packaging so that it fits into a smaller box? Like that can be a whole area. So there's all of these little places in your business where you can chip away at this margin, and it is time worth spending, man, because if you can actually create more margin and less variable cost with every product that you sell, that is the fastest, most amazing way, not necessarily the fastest, but is one of the most powerful ways to create leverage in your business, because now your advertising efforts, all those things are exactly the same. It's the same number of people working on the problem, but every time you sell a product, you make more money, and that is leverage. And again, if you can get above 40 points of margin, you've got probably somewhere to start. It's probably not true above 60 points of margin. It's probably not true leverage yet, but it's at least like a solid start. Okay. You probably look for leverage in other parts of your business. But it's probably a solid start. If you can get above 70 points of margin, you can really fly. And I've seen this happen for a lot of different brands. Like one brand I was working with a long time ago, they came and said like they were working with an agency, and when I was working sort of working with the agency at that point, I was starting to head over to 4x400. But anyway, it doesn't matter. They came and they said like, hey, we need to make our advertising performance better. And I remember somebody at the agency looked at their business and said, actually, you don't really need to make your advertising performance better. You only think that. And this was the mistake I was making on the brand I was telling you about earlier. We didn't need to make our advertising performance better. Our advertising performance was already good. Okay. In this particular brand, they needed to redesign their product from the ground up because they were never going to win at any scale because they had like 40 points of margin or something like that, gross margin to start. And they just were always going to be behind the 8 ball. You cannot scale the business at a 3-to-1. It's not going to work. No, I mean, again, there's exceptions to this, right? There's some ways to do this, but that is only a strategic decision based on leverage points. Let me give you an example. Simple Modern, who has talked about this. One of the things I think is so brilliant about that business is that they actually have a very low margin for D2C. They've been public about this. I've talked about it before, but I think it's something like 35 points of margin, okay, before they pay a single dollar in ads. So it's very low, right? 65 points of COGS. So you say, how does that business even work? Well, that was not a D2C business to start. They did not power their growth on Facebook ads. What they realized at the time early on was that price was strategy. And so they built their price to win, not on D2C, but on Amazon, where price was really competitive. And they could also go to market with a bunch of different colors that other people weren't doing because they built their business for Amazon first. For them, the leverage point was organic search volume on Amazon, right? They knew that they could win by, not that they don't pay any money on Amazon ads, but they knew they could win by winning the listing game on Amazon. And the thing they could use as leverage in their business was the fact that Amazon controls half of all e-commerce spending in the US or whatever the number is, right? And there's a lot of people searching for water bottles on Amazon. And even though it's a highly competitive category, they could outcompete their other competitors in that space by pricing more aggressively than the rest of them, and win by being an Amazon first and tailoring their business to maximize that strategy. They didn't have to maintain a price point to keep their, REI sales in a good spot, or Walmart sales or Target sales or whatever. They weren't building for Target and Walmart, at least primarily. Now, eventually they did that as well, but they started by winning in that particular category. And so that's like the leverage strategic thinking, and think about your cogs in relation to the strategy that I'm talking about here. And I talked about it in a couple places in this episode, but you absolutely should be working with my friends at More Staffing if you're growing an e-commerce business. As I said, the Philippines has 180 million people in it. There are incredibly talented people there who will work on your business and who will bring incredible skill sets to your business, not just as a virtual assistant, $5 an hour. Don't think that way about hiring in the Philippines. Think instead about finding incredible virtual professionals who will work across your business at like manager, director, even executive level roles. I have been so helped. My business would be nowhere near where it is right now if it wasn't for my partnership with my friends at More Staffing, who are the best people to do this. They have like really helped me staff out my business with high quality killer contributors across the business, and I've seen them do it for many more. The opportunity is simple. You get to pay top dollar in a local market for the best possible talent. That top dollar is still less than the same amount you would pay for that, significantly less. Same for that talent in the US. The employee wins, you win, you attract the best talent possible, and your business gets better while creating leverage in your P&L. Go to morestaffing.co/AF, morestaffing.co/AF. The link's in the show notes to get started today. They will help you identify, recruit, train, onboard, coach that talent, and they'll even give you a 1-year guarantee. So if there's somebody who comes to your business and doesn't work out and you have to let them go within a year, they will replace that person for you at no additional cost. Go to morestaffing.co/AF. That is who I'm working with. It's who you should work with too. Again, this other brand I was talking about, they came in to CTC and they were saying, we think we need better advertising performance. They didn't need that. They needed to go redesign their product. They still were going to stay D2C, but they realized that they were never going to win D2C. And to their credit, they did this. They were never going to win D2C if they had the kind of margin that they had initially. And so they went and redesigned the entire product to go create 30 more points of margin. They changed their materials, changed their manufacturing, whatever, and ended up being still a really good product that didn't sacrifice quality. They just realized that when they first built the product, they hadn't done all of that. And that's normal, right? Like when you first go to market, you don't have every problem solved. You have to solve these problems along the way. And so there was an opportunity for them to do that. And that created a bunch more value in the business. And eventually they actually had a really, really great outcome in their business because they created margin and then they worked on all the advertising things, et cetera, alongside it. So along the way, it was a really, really valuable thing for them to get clarity around where the actual problem was in their business. I'll just tell you straight up, the brand that I referenced at the very top of the show, right in the very beginning, the number one mistake I made, the reason that the outcome was only what it was actually that it should never have been a D2C business. What I described there is a business that was not fit for D2C, as I said before, and therefore, in one sense, it's my greatest accomplishment. In another sense, it is actually a mark of how bad of a leader I was at the time and of a real mistake I made. We should have been, because so much of the cost of this business was shipping the product to the customer. It was a heavy product. Shipping to the customer was really expensive. Even if we charged for shipping, we took a loss on it because we could only charge so much for shipping before it killed conversion. We could only put the price so high before it killed conversion, etc. We were just never going to get out from under that. And as much as we tried to use consolidated carriers and all these kinds of things, it just didn't work. We had instead, what we should have done instead was say, you know what? Actually, shipping to a retail partner on a pallet is much cheaper per unit sold than it is shipping D2C. And we should think about our D2C as only one part of something, but the real expansion in this category should be for us something that we are doing via retail, via brick and mortar retail. And that should have been the business we were trying to build. It was just never set up to be a D2C business because it was never going to get out from this core thing. What is D2C? It is direct to consumer. It's shipping a product to a customer. So your shipping costs are central to the model. And if I had realized that and thought about it at the time, I would have said, wait a minute, this is never going to be something we're going to get out from under. It's just not going to happen. And therefore we are going to lose if we keep trying to play the game this way. We need to play the game differently. Okay. So there's a lot of different stuff you can do here. Now on the supply chain side, and it's really hard for me to say generally where the opportunity is for you. Sometimes people are shipping 1PL. They really should be shipping 3PL. I worked with a brand recently that got 5 points of margin back plus by going to a 3PL. And then after they got to the 3PL, And there's like a whole bunch of cold storage issues with this particular brand. And so getting the right 3PL was really hard. There's a lot of customization with each order. So that made it tricky as well. Changing products all the time. That made it tricky as well. But they found a 3PL partner. They worked really hard on it, got a bunch of margin back doing that, and then opened up a second distribution center with that same 3PL somewhere across the country so that they were not shipping to zone 6 and zone 7 and zone 8 as much. And that also was a huge cost saver for them. And that added probably another few points of margin. And so they did a whole bunch of work, put in a whole bunch of effort to go solve those problems. Okay. So again, it may be different for you in where your business could create additional leverage in this part of the business is, but understanding deeply that your number needs to get to a certain point for it to work is really crucial. So if you're at 50 points of margin right now, you need to ask yourself the question, is this something that can get to 60 to 70 points of margin? I mean, that would be crazy to go from 50 to 70, but it's not impossible for some businesses. So can you actually do that? I'm convinced supply chain is the most under-optimized part of your business. It's the most under-optimized part of a lot of businesses because people just haven't taken the time to go attack it the way they should. And because it's hard, it's not obvious how to do it. Okay. So there's that. Okay. So there's a lot of different areas. Again, I can't speak in generalities to what you should be doing. What you should really probably be doing is bringing somebody in who can be helpful to you thinking through this issue. Talk to Mehtab Bogle on this show. They take minority investments in businesses and then they help them solve some of these problems by just shopping for more manufacturers. My friends at More Staffing and More Supply Chain, their companies, there's an ad for them in this episode. Like they are incredible supply chain experts. Like I told them at one point that for a brand I was working on with them, they started an engagement with that brand. They talked to 50 manufacturers in the first week of an engagement. I mean, it's crazy. So way more manufacturers, way more vendors than most people are actually shopping. And that helped them find somebody who was a really, really good partner for this business. So there's some ways to go, but you just need to be thinking, is this a possible leverage point? Where am I today? How can I do better? Okay. All right. Number 2, CAC. Okay. This is why I talk so much. CAC, marketing and advertising for most brands. Okay. Meta ads is your number one ad channel. Okay. For D2C brands. And what you should be thinking about here is there actually an opportunity for me to be gaining significantly on the CAC side of the P&L? Now, it's really hard to say what a good CAC is in e-commerce. It varies so much depending on your goals, your LTV, your unit economics, etc. But you should be thinking about CAC as a potential place for leverage. Okay, so the first thing to point out here is that if it's true that Meta Ads is your first or second biggest line item in your business, and for many businesses it's that big of a cost in your business, it is crucial that you build financially based targets, that you run cost controls, and that you eliminate creative testing campaigns. I won't even rehash all of those because I talk about them so much, but those elements of good media buying in 2024 and beyond, right? I'm recording it in 2024. I imagine they will continue to be important parts of it in the near future here. Those elements of running a Meta Ads account at this point to me are just non-negotiables. Like it's just like there's just so much money that gets wasted on creative testing, on poor management of ads, on not scaling when you can scale and not suppressing when you should suppress. There's so much money wasted because people aren't really clear on how their unit economics play into their ROAS targets and their CAC targets, et cetera. And it's time to get serious about those things because it is such a big cost in your business, okay? So you have to go do those things. But there is a second leverage point here. Well, let's mention 2 of them, okay? One of them is, perhaps for you, organic volume is part of how you create leverage, okay? I had Isaac Medeiros on this podcast a long time ago. They were doing like $10 million in revenue with $0 in ad spend for his store Mini Katana by just creating like absurd amounts of YouTube views and TikTok views and things like that. And so for them, their leverage point was organic demand creation, okay? And that is a leverage point in the business. If you can make the Meta Ads cost on your P&L go to 0, then that's a serious leverage point. If you have a particular skill around generating organic content that gets views, then yes, that is a massive skill and a massive leverage point in your business, okay? Another one, though, that people don't think about with advertising and marketing sometimes is LTV. This is another area where large LTVs, significant LTVs, is a massive leverage point in the business, because what it really represents is revenue that comes in apart from ad spend. And over enough time, if you have a really good LTV, you create the CAC as a percentage of your revenue goes down and down and down and down and down. And if you want to know why there are so many skincare brands and supplement brands, it's because in skincare, it's very, very good gross margin and it's really like excellent gross margin and very, very good LTV. In supplements, it's good gross margin, sometimes great gross margin, and incredible out of this world LTV based on subscription. Now, again, we've leaned into a place where D2C makes tons of sense, right? Because for something like a supplement, it is the perfect way for a customer to buy the product. Or the mechanism of buying the product online and having it shipped to my house is the absolute best way to buy that product. If I know for sure that I want to take my multivitamin every day, then it's really easy to just set up a 30-day recurring order and have it show up in my house. And I'm just going to take that for every day for however long. It's great. I don't even have to think about it. It just shows up. Subscription is awesome, right? In that respect, D2C is perfect. LTV goes through the roof, and you've got the basics of a really, really good business. It's pretty high margin, extremely high LTV, and you can create a huge amount of value on your P&L. If returning customer revenue takes up a larger and larger and larger and larger percentage of the total revenue in your business, okay, if that happens, then what that means is CAC is going to take up a smaller and smaller and smaller percentage of your total P&L. And that ends up being a way that you just create more and more bottom line margin and really, really good outcomes. This is why these businesses are so good and so popular to start, okay? So LTV is a huge thing, but you don't have to have best-in-class LTV for it to matter. Even 50 or 60 points of 50 or 60% LTV in a year. So again, that defined as if a customer spends $1 with me today, they spend 50 to 60 cents more over the course of the year. Even that gets you somewhere. It's pretty helpful as a starting point. Okay, and if and now, again, that's not true leverage on your P&L, but now you're starting to talk about where, like, okay, if you have 60 points of margin, so not incredible, and 50 to 60 points or 50 to 60% LTV in a year, something like that, decent, not incredible. Now you've got, okay, a solid business that can get you somewhere. And maybe it's not set up for like massive explosive growth or whatever, but it can be something. If you have 200% LTV in a year and 55 points of gross margin, then you can actually be somewhere there because your LTV is so strong. So you don't have to have leverage everywhere, but having leverage in a couple places can be really good. And if you just do this math, if you just build a cohort forecast for yourself at some point, right? If you know how to do it, and think and just look at what happens over time, right? Then you can end up with CAC becoming a lower and lower percentage of your business. One way I've visualized this recently is by thinking about how like if you started a business from scratch and it had like basically like let's call it 60% LTV in 1 year, and you increase spend slowly over time, okay, you can really easily go from like, let's say in month one, your CAC is 50% of your P&L, right? Because you like have literally no returning customers. Okay. So whatever revenue you get is all new customers by definition. Like even if you hold your spend relatively constant or even start growing your spend, right? Within a year, spending the same amount of money per month nets out to being like 30 to 35%, CAC as a percentage of your total P&L. And it gets smaller just because returning customers come. And that means that you end up creating more revenue while CAC shrinks as a total percentage of the pie. Okay. So that's a dynamic to keep in mind as you forecast your business, is how CAC plays out. Hopefully you're spending more money over time as you're continuing to grow, et cetera. That's definitely what you want. But with returning customer revenue, it's potentially a huge leverage point in the business. Okay. So that's number 2. Do you have an opportunity like that somewhere there? Some other people, by the way, have massive TAM. So they just have a ton of people they can reach. So the CAC isn't particularly low, but it scales really, really fast and really, really well because they just have such a huge audience. Other people sometimes just have massive skill in marketing and advertising, and that is a leverage point. I would just say apply that leverage point to the best opportunity possible, right? If you have incredible marketing and advertising skill, and you can also find a business that has good margin and good LTV, I mean, that's really a real opportunity for you to take the skill you have and again create leverage against it. As you apply the force of that skill to the business, it creates a better outcome. Okay. All right. Lastly, OpEx. Okay, fixed costs in the business. This is another thing that I think is really crucial, and people need to understand this. One of the things that makes D2C work as a model is that you can run it really, really lean. Here's a way of thinking about this. How much does it cost for you to design one email? And the answer to the question is the same amount as it costs you to design that email, whether you send it to 1,000 people or 1,000,000 people. And that basic dynamic, okay, that the cost of designing the email shrinks as a percentage of the revenue that it creates, okay, that basic dynamic is in place for lots and lots of e-commerce. You can run incredibly lean e-commerce businesses. I remember hearing an interview with the CEO of ButcherBox who was saying they were like $2 or $3 million in revenue ahead in their company. I think it was like 3, because it was like 160 employees for a $500 million business or something like that. So somewhere in that range, right? So roughly $3 million ahead. That is the opposite of a software business, right? The software business scales because the unit economics scale so well, but you need developers, okay? And I don't know. I mean, I guess software businesses also have some scale against their OpEx, but it's just certainly the opposite of a service business. It's just you're always going to have, to some degree, a huge cost of OpEx in your service business as a percentage of your that is your unit economics. It's a percentage of your revenue. It's going to be the case. But in e-commerce, this is the thing that can shrink the most as your business grows, and you should be relentlessly focused on staying lean as you grow. And that is actually the key here. Okay, is that by staying focused on the next best opportunity next in your business, you can do a great job of making sure that even as your business grows, you don't get fat. And if you can avoid that, you could do really well. This is also the case for hiring overseas talent. If you're already distributed workforce for your business, why not go look all over the world for the best talent you can at the best possible price and see what opportunities are there? The Philippines, who I talk about a lot, where I'm working with in my business, right, has 180 million people. There's really talented people in the Philippines where you can pay top dollars in the market for somebody, so you attract the best talent in the market. And at the same time, it's less than paying that same person in the U.S. Everybody wins in that case. Okay, so there's all of these opportunities. Both you and the employee both win there. There's all these opportunities to think that way about your business. There's also little things to do here, like audit your software costs, resist solving process problems with people. That's another thing, right? Like having discipline about your hiring. There's a lot of stuff that I could say about how to do this. But the key is to recognize that OpEx should be low as a percentage of your revenue. The simple heuristic here is you want to get below 15%. And if you can get 10% or less, that's like best in class, okay? If you can have those numbers, you can be in really good shape. Again, creates a really big leverage point in your P&L. And it's something it's core to DTC in general and ought to be core to your business. Okay, so I hope what I've done in this episode has helped you think through every element of your P&L and start to think less about it's something given to me and more about something that I've designed that I have the opportunity to pursue. Some of you may hear about this and go like, wait a minute, I don't have very good margin. I can't create that much revenue, which makes it really hard for me to scale revenue and keep OpEx low as a percentage of revenue. My LTV isn't particularly good, etc. Wait, why am I doing this business? And if that's the outcome for you, then fine. That's like the reality. You need to think about that outcome and decide, what do you do next? Do you try and find a leverage point, or do you decide to pursue a different opportunity? Like, who knows? Okay. There's a lot of different things you could do with this. Or maybe you think, I need to go hammer away at different parts of my business to create the leverage point. Or maybe you need to just more aggressively invest in the opportunity that you're pursuing because you already have the leverage point. You just didn't realize it. All right. But whatever it is, I want you to think about your P&L as something you design, not something that's given to you, and then go attack the areas with the most force possible where you can create the biggest opportunities for yourself. Thanks so much for watching or listening. I hope you will subscribe wherever you are doing that. I've got a few more solo episodes coming up soon. Then I have a run of interviews that are going to be great, including a couple interviews talking about people who have had success on TikTok shops, as well as some early thoughts on YouTube shops. I think that's going to be really interesting. That's a really hot topic right now that I haven't dove into as much. But I've got Jordan West coming, who's changed his whole agency from being meta ads focused to TikTok shops and other shops focused, which I think is fascinating. And I've got Paul. I actually don't know how to say his last name, but Paul from BK Beauty, big TikTok shops brand. They're both coming soon, which I think is going to be great. I also have Aaron Orndorff coming soon, and a whole bunch of good episodes. So definitely make sure you subscribe wherever you're watching or listening today. If you'd like to email me, I would love to hear from you. You can do that at podcast@ajfgrowth.com. You can also reach out to me on Twitter at Andrew J. Ferris. I would love any conversation to be public so that other people can weigh in as well. Make sure to tag me with any thoughts. Thanks so much for watching and listening. I'll see you next time.